thank you to our witnesses for coming in front of our committee yet again. Um, I'm going to pick up a little bit on what Mr. Kaplan-Mirth was saying. When we were listening to Rogers and Shaw earlier this week, it was clear that what I had always thought of as competition, and what I think most consumers think of as competition, many players competing for the same pool of customers, was looked on quite differently by both Rogers and Shaw. And in fact, one of the representatives from Rogers used the term dynamic competition. And so perhaps Mr. Lawford, I have tried to look this up and I find it quite confusing. Could you maybe elaborate on this concept of dynamic competition that in fact it sounded like Rogers was using that as their statement that there was increased competition?
Yeah, I think it's a business gobbledygook term. It doesn't actually have any meaning. But what I would say is what I think they're thinking is they will be larger and better capitalized and therefore able to roll out services on the pace they want to, where they want to, when they want to, because there's fewer players and they don't have to turn in and face a fourth competitor in the market and divert resources. So I believe that's what these guys are calling dynamic competition. It's more control over competition.
In other words, fewer players, they can actually potentially access a bigger piece of the pie that's out there in essence. That's the way I kind of ended up interpreting it. Would you say that's kind of how it could end up?
I think you did about as well as anybody could in that with that term.
Thank you. Now, given the fact that the efficiencies defense does still exist in the Competition Act, and given the fact that, again, Rogers is saying that as a larger, better capitalized company, that they are going to be able to invest in 5G and all the commitments that they have made and that are on their website, etc. How is there any way that the Competition Bureau, notwithstanding this efficiencies defense, could in somehow make it a condition that Rogers, in fact, does deploy uh, the 5G commitments that they're making to remote communities, to Indigenous communities? Is that potentially a condition that could be put on an agreement to this acquisition?
Yes, the Competition Bureau, when they have a settlement with a company, merging companies can put in conditions and they can follow up, usually up to 5 years afterwards. So they could dream up any conditions to put on here. But I would just say on the efficiencies defense, the Competition Bureau could win that as well. If prices go up, that's what's called a deadweight loss. So if prices go up in the entire industry, and that goes on the consumer side of the scale for this efficiencies balance. Also, if the shareholders of Rogers get a lot more money, well, who owns shares in Canada? It tends to be the people in the top quintile of income. That's counted as a loss to lower income Canadians, and that goes on the consumer side of the scale too. So the Competition Bureau could conclude the efficiencies are actually on the consumer side and say no to the deal. They did that with Bell MTS, but at the end they brokered this big leaf deal with putting on ExploreNet, which was a travesty. But they could be taking a hard line, and your committee, if they mention something about the efficiencies defense, could give a little steel in the spine of the Competition Bureau.
Well, that's reassuring to a certain extent because it's hard to see who on earth is in favor of this merger other than the shareholders and the families involved. I mean, and as Ms. Tribe has shown with her petition and so on, and it's clearly, I haven't heard anyone in favor. So it's reassuring that the Competition Bureau can kind of balance those competing interests to a certain extent. Um, I guess, Ms. Tribe, how would you feel if there were conditions such as Mr. Lawford has potentially described? Would you be satisfied in any way?
I would have to get really creative in the amount of conditions that I could possibly put forward to find something that would offset this enough to make it worthwhile. I think we are so far from where we need to be under the current circumstances that trying to take so many creative measures to prevent us going backwards is a bit much. Sorry, we're out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.